On August 14, 1989, a woman walked out of the forest near Burnt River, Ontario, and onto a rural road. She was 39 years old. She weighed roughly 80 pounds. Her right arm was gone, amputated above the elbow, and the wound had been closed by hand inside the commune she had just escaped. She flagged down a ride to the nearest hospital and told the staff what had been done to her. Then she told the police. The man who had taken her arm called himself a prophet. His name was Roch Thériault, and for 12 years he ran a religious community in the Canadian wilderness, where this was normal. The hardest part of this story is not what he did. It is that the police had circled this place for years and kept being turned away, and not because they were squeamish, and not because they were lazy. To understand why, you have to go back to 1977. Roch Thériault was born on May 16, 1947, in rural Quebec, into a poor and strictly Catholic family. He left formal school young and taught himself the Old Testament instead, with a particular fixation on the Book of Revelation and its account of the end of the world. By his 20s, he was drinking heavily, and his first marriage had fallen apart. In the mid-1970s, he joined the Seventh-day Adventist church, gave up alcohol and tobacco, followed its rules closely, and turned out to be a gifted public speaker. He organized seminars, people listened to him, and in 1977, in the town of Sainte-Marie, Quebec, he convinced a group of those people to quit their jobs, sell what they owned, and follow him into a commune to wait for the apocalypse. He named the group the Ant Hill Kids, after the way he wanted them to work, like ants, constantly, without question. They wore identical tunics to signal equality, and they called him Papi, meaning father. In April 1978, the Adventist Church expelled him. So instead of borrowing someone else's religion, he built his own. He renamed himself Moïse, the French name for Moses, gave the women new biblical names, and told them the world would end in February 1979, and that only he could lead them through it. Later that year, he moved the group deeper into isolation, hiking them up to a remote site in the Gaspé Peninsula that he named the Eternal Mountain. 23 people made the trip. They built the settlement by hand while Thériault directed. They worked to exhaustion, ate on rations, and slept very little. He cut their contact with their families. He performed marriages between members himself, none of them legally binding, and later required his own permission for couples to have sex at all. By then, the outside world had started to notice. The Jonestown Massacre in November 1978 had put the word cult in every newspaper, and the Canadian press began applying it to the tunic-wearing group in the woods. Thériault was followed home after a radio interview and ordered to undergo a psychiatric evaluation. 2 members were deported over visa problems. The group that had numbered 23 was down to 15, and then February 1979 arrived, and the world did not end. This is the moment the whole thing should have collapsed. For almost every doomsday group, a failed apocalypse is the ending. The followers wake up, look around at the date that came and went, and leave. Inside the Ant Hill Kids, the prophecy failed and the grip got tighter. Thériault started punishing members for what he called sins, and the punishments climbed in stages, each one normalizing the next. It began with beatings using belts and hammers. Within a few years, it had become things that are difficult to read aloud from the court record. Members were made to break their own legs with sledgehammers, to sit on a lit stove, to shoot one another in the shoulder, and to eat feces and dead mice. A follower could be ordered to cut off another follower's toes to prove loyalty. The group survived on money from baked goods and crafts, and anyone who failed to earn enough was punished too. The children were held to the same rules. In 1981, an infant named Samuel Giguère died on the commune. A member named Guy Vere fled and told a nearby town that a child had been killed and buried on the property. Police arrived. A coroner found evidence of foul play, and 9 children were removed into foster care. The parents were told they could have their children back the moment they walked away from Thériault. They refused, and because the case against the adults stalled, the commune stayed intact. So Thériault did what he would do every time pressure built. He moved. In 1984, he relocated the surviving group to a remote property near Burnt River, Ontario, about 70 kilometers northeast of Toronto, and started over. The pattern repeated almost exactly. Authorities grew uneasy about the number of small children living in the bush, and the Children's Aid Society removed more than 20 of them over the following years, including 17 taken in a single intervention in 1987. The children, they could reach. The adults, somehow, they could not. And still the adults stayed. Around the mid-1980s, Thériault gave himself a new title. He decided he was a healer with divine medical knowledge, despite having no training of any kind. He began performing operations on his followers with kitchen tools and no anesthetic, often while they were conscious. People lost teeth, fingers, and limbs on his table. When a procedure went wrong, the fault was assigned to the patient's weak faith, never to the man holding the knife. The worse his outcomes, the more essential he made himself look. In the fall of 1988, that logic killed a woman named Solange Boilard. She was 32 and had followed him for years. She complained of stomach pain, and instead of taking her to a doctor, Thériault decided to operate on her himself. What he did to her that night was not medicine in any sense, and she died the next day from the damage. Convinced he held the power of resurrection, he had his followers open her skull because he believed he could bring her back. She stayed dead. They buried her a short walk from the commune, and for almost a year, no one on the outside knew she was gone. The follower he ordered to assist that night was Gabrielle Lavallée. She had already survived years of this. She had burns, missing teeth, and a hypodermic needle that had snapped off inside her back. She had left the commune 4 separate times between late 1988 and the summer of 1989, and every time she came back, unable to function outside the only world she had left. After Boilard's death, the violence aimed at her reached its endpoint. On July 26, 1989, Thériault pinned her hand to a table with a hunting knife, and then amputated her arm. That injury is what finally carried her out of the trees 3 weeks later, on the August morning this story opened with. Once Lavallée reached a hospital and the police, the structure came apart fast. Thériault hid in the woods and evaded officers searching with dog teams and helicopters for several weeks before he was arrested. On October 6, 1989, investigators dug up Boilard's remains on the property, confirming a death no one had ever reported. He was first sentenced to 12 years for the assault that took Lavallee's arm. Then, on January 18, 1993, he pleaded guilty to second-degree murder for Boilard's death and was given a life sentence. He was denied parole in 2002 and never applied again. A few women stayed loyal even after the verdict, and he fathered 4 more children during prison visits before those children were taken and placed for adoption. On February 26, 2011, at 63, Thériault was killed in his cell by another inmate. That leaves the question the cold open started with. The signs were visible for more than a decade. A child died, a body was rumored, members kept appearing with injuries no one could explain. So why did stopping him require a woman to lose an arm and walk out on her own? The answer is almost dull next to the violence it allowed. Thériault had registered his community as a church. Under the law at the time, that classification protected the adults inside it from investigation. Officials were permitted to check on the welfare of the children, and they did, repeatedly. They were not permitted to intervene in what grown members appeared to be choosing for themselves. Thériault knew exactly where that line sat, and he built his entire operation on the legal side of it. The law that shielded him has since changed. The arithmetic it left behind has not. A child died in 1981. 9 children were removed that year, then 17 more by 1987. A woman was killed in 1988, and buried a short walk from where everyone slept. Every one of those facts sat in a file somewhere, known to someone official, and the system that recorded them was only free to act in full after Gabrielle Lavallée walked out of those same woods in 1989 with one arm. For 12 years, the only thing standing between Roch Thériault and the people inside that commune was not a locked gate or a stretch of wilderness. It was a line on a registration form, and he stayed on the right side of it the whole time.